Hey everyone, for those of you who regularly follow my videos, you already know. You've already got a leg up over everyone else, and you have a firm grasp and understanding of what kind of effect mass immigration is having on our housing market. Which is quite profound, I'll add. Now there are a lot of other contributing factors as well, such as central bank policy in terms of interest rates and trying to entice people to assume more debt. But make no mistake about it, immigration, mass immigration, the kind of levels of immigration that's happening in Canada currently and has been not just under the federal Liberals' watch, but even under the Harper Conservatives' watch, is ramped up to the point where, we're adding, under the Liberals now, currently we're adding 1 million people, basically the population of Nova Scotia to this country every 3 years. And since housing starts or building projects aren't keeping up with that kind of pace, well, the old law of supply and demand, well, that's playing a really huge role as well. But once again, who's in charge of that? Governments. Governments have control over not just building permits and immigration, but once again, like I said, because of the fact that the Bank of Canada is a legislative act produced by government legislation as well, well, it also has effect on even domestic Canadians in terms of their housing market viability or options. But for this particular video, we're going to stick to the immigration part of that equation and the profound effect that's having on the housing market for Canadians, new or old. Headline out of CBC News, Toronto. 1 in 5 homes in Canada bought by newcomers. Royal LePage survey says people new to Canada contribute significantly to real estate demand, CEO says. This is being reported by Muriel Dreisma, October 16th, 2019. 1 in every 5 homes in Canada is bought by newcomers to the country, according to a Royal LePage survey released on Wednesday. The Royal LePage Newcomers 2019 survey, which was commissioned by the real estate company, found that newcomers spend about 3 years in Canada before buying a home, and that 75% of newcomers arrive with savings or cash to help buy a home. So that kind of already, just that first part of that article is already kind of alluding or suggesting that, these people that are come this country under the mass immigration or immigration program, they're not people that are necessarily poor and in desperate need of help or have to flee their country. A lot of them are people with a lot of money. And of course, big government, in addition to big business or crony corporations, well, they salivate at the very prospect of being able to soak up a large substantial portion of that wealth that these immigrants are bringing to this country. But at the very least, like I say, it tells you that, because I know a lot of Canadians, they always say when they're talking about immigration or migrants come to this country, they always say, oh, we got to help them because they're in desperate need of help. Well, this is suggesting the exact opposite. These are people that are doing a whole lot better than the typical Canadian. And apparently that's happened before they've even stepped foot in this country, which makes you question, why do they feel so compelled to come here in the first place? Could it be that Canada's now been a haven for money laundering, cronyism, authoritarian collectivism, and benefit at everyone else's expense? Well, I guess what they're looking at immigrants is, hey, buy a home in Canada, and it becomes a proverbial pot of gold that you can just sit back and reap the benefits from, right? Of course, that comes at the expense of the lowly home buyer, of the typical millennial in particular in this country, who are desperately trying to find a place to live or start their families. About 1,500 people, all of whom arrived in Canada within the last 10 years, were interviewed by public opinion polling and market research company Legier for the survey, and it was conducted online in August. Phil Soper, president and CEO of Royal LePage, said in an interview with CBC's Radio Canada that the survey found that newcomers represent about 21% of all home buyers in Canada. That number suggests people new to the country are contributing significantly to real estate demand, he said. We know that Canada is a country of immigrants, and we know that newcomers to Canada are an important part of our economic growth. What surprises us in the data is just how important they are to Canada's real estate market, Soper said on Tuesday. If current international migration levels are maintained, Royal LePage estimates that newcomers are expected to buy 680,000 homes in Canada over the next 5 years. The projected home sales was calculated using historic migration levels from Statistics Canada. The survey's home ownership rate of newcomers and Canadian Real Estate Association and Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation unit sales data. Anyways, folks, I'll add as well that if you go through my past videos and just type in immigrants and housing, In the search term under the video section of my YouTube channel, you'll see I've already covered this topic quite extensively, with at least 6 or 7 very informative videos to try to get you up to speed in terms of migration and its effect on the housing market in this country, which, like I say, is very profound, which is being recognized and acknowledged in this article as well. Royal LePage defines newcomers as people who have lived in Canada for 10 years or less. They include immigrants, students, refugees, and citizens from other countries in Canada to work. Yeah, can't forget about that temporary foreign worker program as well, right? Lots of schemes have been set up that play a huge and a profound effect on the Canadians that live in this country. According to the company, 31% of newcomers are part of a family, 25% are students, while 20% are on their own. The vast majority of newcomers are immigrants, Soper said. Soper said newcomers to Canada represent between 2 and 3 million people, while the total Canadian population is roughly 37 million. He noted about 300,000 people come to Canada as immigrants every year. What was surprising to us is just how many newcomers come to Canada are focused on owning a home. Depending on the region of the country, almost all newcomers arrive with the necessary funds to purchase a home, Soper said. The survey found that 86% of newcomers see real estate as a good investment, right? Investment, not somewhere to just put down roots, to buy a home, a place to live, a roof over your head, somewhere to provide shelter for your family, right? No, it's an investment. It's part of this Ponzi/housing scheme in this country that, like I say, has been pricing the typical Canadian out of the marketplace for a long time and is only getting worse because of this massive ramp up in wealthy immigrants making things worse for the working poor in this country, who, like I say, for the most part, just want a roof over their head as a shelter for their family. About 32% of newcomers in Canada own homes, while 68% of all Canadians are homeowners, according to the survey. Of newcomers who buy a home, the survey says 51% buy a detached house, 18% buy a condo, 15% buy a townhouse, and 13% buy a semi-detached house. So 51%, the majority of newcomers or immigrants that come to this country are buying the most expensive house, a detached house. It used to be that an immigrant got on a ship and arrived in the new land and they really didn't know what they were getting into. With the internet, of course, people understand the economies, the housing markets, the job markets of the regions that they're arriving in, he said. If they choose a relatively expensive part of the country like Vancouver, they probably have the means to live in Vancouver. Oh, in reference to this part, it used to be that immigrants got on a ship and arrived in a new land that they really didn't know what they were getting to do. Let me just say, in the past, historically, all those people that say, oh, Canada is nothing but a country filled with immigrants. Well, yeah, prior to the welfare state, the introduction of forced wealth and income redistribution on a rampant scale in the mid-20th century, yeah, all those Canadians that come to this country historically, they had to pull themselves up by the bootstrap and take care of themselves and their family based on their own means. Not through this forced wealth and income redistributive scheme that all these immigrants, or this housing market Ponzi scheme that these newcomers or these immigrants are using today. Totally different scenario, folk. One is completely legit and moral in nature. The other is, like I say, based and built upon a gigantic Ponzi scheme set up by big government and crony corporations in this country. So to try to compare or contrast the two is not only an intellectual failure, but it's an outright lie and deceptive practice used to alleviate the concerns of Canadians. Yeah, there's a huge difference between a historical settler to Canada and someone who's an immigrant under this modern top-down authoritarian scheme that is big government in Canada today. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.